I wasn't even looking for love. I was 62, not desperate, not broken, just quiet. Living in a house that used to be louder, raising tea to my lips at 6 a.m. because my bones liked warmth more than wine these days. And somehow, I was okay with that. Then he came, with his tired eyes and silver-threaded hair, and that kind of laugh that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He called me radiant, said I didn't look my age, as if my age was something I was supposed to apologize for. I didn't know that a compliment could be a setup, that admiration could turn into quiet cruelty, and that one day he'd look at me like I'd expired, like milk left out too long. I remember the exact words. We were sitting in the living room. I was barefoot, comfortable, free, and he said, "Grace, maybe you're just too old to be loved like that now." Like that. With the kind of love you write poems about. The kind that touches you without touching you. He said it as if it were a diagnosis, like he was doing me a favor, naming the disease I hadn't noticed. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I just looked at him. And in that moment I saw it. He didn't see me anymore. Not the way I wanted, not the way I deserved. And this story you're about to hear isn't about heartbreak. It's about what happened when I stopped asking to be seen by someone who'd already closed his eyes. It's about what bloomed after. His name was Julian Cade, a man with a voice like slow bourbon and eyes that flickered when he was lying, though he rarely told outright lies. No, Julian was more sophisticated than that. He dealt in half-truths, in omissions, in compliments with expiration dates. We met at a book club in Charleston, one I never planned to attend, but a neighbor insisted. I was there for the cookies. He was there for attention. He was 49, recently divorced, a writer of 2 novels no one had read, and 1 memoir that sold just enough to make him smug. He spoke in metaphors, drank black coffee, quoted Baldwin and Bukowski in the same breath, and he looked at me like I was the only woman in the room. "You're not like the others," he said. I smiled. "Because I have gray hair?" He leaned closer. "No, because you don't pretend to be someone you're not. That's rare." And that was the first hook. Because at 62, you don't expect to be pursued. You don't expect to feel wanted. Not in the way that makes your stomach flutter like you're 20 again. I told myself to be cautious, but my heart, my poor, hungry heart, whispered, "Why not?" He started showing up with poetry books, took me to jazz nights and farmers markets. He held my hand like it was sacred, kissed my palm in the middle of a crowded room like I was something precious. I didn't tell my son Darren at first. He'd worry, he always did. But I couldn't keep Julian a secret for long, not with the way he lit up the air around me. When I finally introduced them over dinner, Darren was polite, but cold. His wife, Lacey, wasn't even that. "He's charming. Too charming," she said later, pulling me aside. "Just be careful, Grace. Not everyone is looking for love." I brushed her off because I thought I knew better. I thought I could tell the difference between sincerity and strategy. I let Julian move in 6 months later. He said it would be temporary, that he just needed a place to finish his new novel. I liked the sound of that, being his muse, his safe place. I didn't know then that I was just a placeholder, a soft landing until his ego found firmer ground. But for a little while, I believed it. I believed in us. And that, more than anything, is what hurts in hindsight. Not that he fooled me, but that I let him. It didn't happen all at once. Cruelty never does. It comes in whispers, not shouts. In glances that linger too long on someone else. In silences that used to be filled with laughter. The first time I noticed the shift, we were brushing our teeth. I caught him looking at me. Not with affection, but with something like calculation. "You ever think about doing something with these?" He gestured vaguely toward my eyes. "Just a little Lift? It's not about vanity, just maintenance. I laughed because I thought it was a joke, but he didn't laugh back. That's when I felt the first crack. Then came the comments. Casual, dismissive, razor thin. That blouse is nice. Very age appropriate. You should see how Linda takes care of herself. She's 60 but looks 40. You're beautiful, Grace, but you've softened a bit. Softened. As if love came with a texture requirement. He stopped touching me as much. No more hands on my back in the kitchen. No more pulling me into him when I walked past. And when I reached for him at night, he rolled over with the excuse of being tired. Every night, and I began to shrink. I started second-guessing everything, my clothes, my voice, the way I moved. I caught myself Googling non-surgical facelift at 2 a.m. Me, the same woman who once taught young girls to love their unfiltered selves. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he stopped saying anything at all. He began staying out later, blamed creative ruts and writing zones. I found receipts for wine bars I'd never been to. I asked him once, "Are you seeing someone else?" He looked genuinely offended. "Of course not. Why would you even ask that?" But the problem wasn't infidelity. It was something colder. He had stopped seeing me. I was no longer a muse. I was maintenance, background, support staff. And the worst part, I started believing him. I looked in the mirror and saw the story he was writing about me, the one where I was fading, becoming less worthy of passion. But something in me, some small, stubborn ember, refused to go out completely. I just didn't know yet that I was getting ready to burn brighter than I ever had before. There wasn't a single moment, no grand betrayal, no screaming match, just a slow accumulation of disappointments, and one quiet, cutting realization. I was becoming invisible in my own life. One morning, I stood in the kitchen, barefoot, pouring tea. He came in, glanced at me and said, "You always drink tea now. That's so crone energy." He laughed. I didn't. I looked at him, really looked, and saw nothing left that deserved the softness I'd been giving. Something clicked in me. Not rage, not even heartbreak, just clarity. That afternoon I packed his things, not angrily, deliberately. His books first, the ones I bought him, the poetry I read out loud in bed, then his writing notebooks, his chargers, the expensive cologne he said made him feel young. Everything went into 3 neat boxes. I didn't touch the mug he always used, the one I gave him that said, "Not all who wander are lost." Because now I knew better. Some who wander are just running from themselves. When he came home and saw the boxes by the front door, he actually smiled. "Going somewhere?" he asked, cocky. I looked him in the eye. "You are." His smirk faltered. "What the hell is this?" "This," I said, "is me choosing myself." Finally. He laughed, but there was an edge of panic in it. "Come on, Grace, you're being dramatic." I didn't respond, just walked past him into my bedroom and closed the door. I heard him pacing in the living room. He didn't shout, didn't beg, just left. The silence after the door closed wasn't lonely. It was sacred, like my home had finally exhaled. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in my lap, feeling everything and nothing at once. This wasn't revenge. This was resurrection. The first night without him was the quietest my house had ever been. No footsteps pacing at 2 a.m., no keyboard clicks from his late-night writing zones, no smell of his cologne lingering in the hallway, just stillness. And I'll be honest, it terrified me. Grief doesn't always come after death. Sometimes it arrives after release, even when the release is right. I wandered the house like a ghost, not crying, not sleeping, just existing. The kettle felt heavier, The couch too wide. The silence thick like fog. My phone buzzed. A message from my friend Eloise. "You okay?" I typed back. "I think so. It's just quiet." She replied, "That's not always a bad thing." At first, I tried to fill the silence. I turned on old music, called people I hadn't spoken to in months, even watched reruns of shows I used to love, hoping to feel like myself again. But nothing fit, because I wasn't her anymore, the woman who shaped her life around another person's orbit. The version of me that existed before Julian had been cracked open. And maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. On the third morning, I opened every window in the house. I lit a lavender candle, swept the floors like I was sweeping out pieces of him, took every photo of us off the wall and placed them in a shoebox gently, not with bitterness, but finality. And then I did something small, but radical. I sat with myself in silence. I poured tea, held the cup with both hands, listened to the birds outside, really listened. And I said out loud, "You're not broken, Grace. You're just alone. And alone isn't the same as empty." That was the beginning. Not of healing, not yet, but of space. And space, I would come to learn, is where everything begins to grow. It started with a single bulb, a tulip. I don't know why I bought it. I was at the hardware store picking up a new light fixture, and there it was, a paper bag of tulip bulbs with a photo on the front. Soft, deep red, open, honest. Something about it spoke to me. I hadn't gardened in years. Julian always said it was too messy and bad for his allergies. So I had stopped. But that morning, with dirt under my nails and sweat gathering on my brow, I felt alive. The soil was still cool from spring rains. I knelt in silence, planting not just flowers, but something inside myself I'd buried long ago. It became a ritual. Every morning before breakfast, I'd walk the perimeter of my yard, checking for signs of life, a stem, a bud, something, anything that whispered, "You're growing." Inside, the mirror became a different kind of garden, one I was learning to look at with softer eyes. I stopped wearing foundation, stopped covering the laugh lines, the age spots, the softness beneath my jawline. I let my face just exist. One morning, brushing my hair, I caught a glimpse of myself and didn't flinch, didn't sigh, didn't reach for concealer. I just looked and thought, "You're still here and you're still beautiful, not in spite of the years, because of them." I started buying clothes that made me feel strong instead of acceptable. Started reading aloud again, to no one. Danced barefoot in the kitchen, not for anyone watching, but for the woman who had stopped dancing long ago. The silence that once haunted me now held space, space to breathe, to rebuild, to root myself in a new season. And every day, the garden grew a little more. So did I. It had been 3 months of silence, of no messages, no footsteps in the hallway, no scent of cologne on my pillow. Then one Sunday morning, the air thick with late spring, my phone buzzed. "Julian!" I hadn't blocked him, not out of hope, but because I didn't need to. The message was short. "Saw your photo in the paper, the local feature on your garden. You look radiant. Miss you. Can we talk?" Radiant. That word again. The same one he used when he first met me, back when I was flattered by words that only shimmered on the surface. I didn't reply. I placed the phone down beside me, got up, and walked outside to the garden. The tulips had bloomed, red, honest, open. I knelt beside them, fingers brushing against the petals. They had no idea he existed, no idea I'd once questioned my worth. They were here for the sun, the soil, and nothing else. That evening, he messaged again. I was an idiot, Grace. I didn't see what I had, but I see it now. No, I thought. You don't see me. You see who I've become without you, and now you want to be part of that story. But you weren't part of the becoming. You were the reason for it. I didn't answer that message either. The next day, he sent one last line. Please, just coffee? I deleted it. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with the kind of peace that comes only after you've outgrown someone completely. People think closure comes from confrontation, from final words, from slamming doors or bitter goodbyes. But the deepest kind of closure is the one they never hear. It's the silence, the stillness, the life you build without them, that they can only watch from a distance. I didn't need to say anything. He already knew. It was a quiet Sunday, the kind where time slows down just enough to notice the softness in the air. I was sitting on the porch, sipping chamomile, when I saw Darren's car pull into the driveway, alone. No Lacey, no grandkids. He stepped out carrying a paper bag. I brought muffins, he said, almost sheepishly. Blueberry, my favorite. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that used to feel strained, but now it just felt spacious. He looked at me differently, not with concern, not with judgment, but with curiosity, like he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. You're different, Mom, I smiled. Is that a bad thing? No, he said. You just seem lighter, stronger maybe, happier even. That surprised me, not because it wasn't true, but because he noticed. He looked down at his coffee, swirling it in slow circles. I didn't get it before, he said finally. Why you let him in? Why you stayed with someone like him? I didn't defend myself, didn't rush to explain. But then he looked up, eyes gentler than they'd been in years. I think I do now. I waited. You needed someone to remind you of yourself, he said. Even if he did it by accident, even if it hurt. Sometimes. That's how it works, right? I felt my throat tighten, because he wasn't just talking about Julian. He was talking about himself, about the distance, the missed birthdays, the way he'd started treating me like furniture. Always there, always quiet. I'm sorry I didn't show up more, he added. I thought you were fine, or I guess I didn't really think about it at all. I reached across the table, placed my hand over his, not to comfort him, but to anchor us both in that moment. We all forget each other sometimes, I said. But the beautiful thing about love is it forgives the remembering. He smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I saw my son, not just as the man he had become, but as the little boy I used to rock to sleep, who still lived somewhere beneath the stubble and tired eyes. We finished our muffins in silence, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full of everything we hadn't said, and finally could. It was Eloise who told me. She always knows everything before the newspapers do. Julian's speaking at the Southern Writers' Conference next weekend, she said, stirring her espresso like she was delivering gossip with a garnish. He's got a new book out. Memoir, apparently. One of the chapters is about you. I didn't flinch, just kept slicing strawberries for my tart. It's called The One I Let Go, she added, eyes watching me closely. I chuckled. More like the one who let herself go right out the door. She laughed, but I didn't. Not really. That night I Googled the event, saw his name listed as a keynote speaker, saw the smug photo, chin tilted, sleeves rolled like he was about to tell the world how pain made him deeper. I didn't go, not out of fear, but because some things are better felt from a distance, like storms over the ocean. Later, Someone who had attended messaged me, a former student of all people. He spoke about a woman he loved and lost, said he didn't realize her worth until it was too late. He cried, Grace, on stage. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt untouched because I had already left that chapter. He was still living inside it. I imagined him reading a passage aloud to a crowd that didn't know me, framing the story in his favor as men like him do. She was older, wiser. I was too blind to see it. I lost her because I wasn't ready to love fully. They probably clapped. Maybe even gave him a standing ovation. But here's the truth. If you ever truly see someone, truly, you don't need to lose them to understand their value. You don't wait until they walk away to cherish what was standing in front of you. You don't build a stage to tell the story. You didn't have the courage to live. I didn't buy his book, didn't read the chapter, didn't care to know what version of me he'd written, because I was already living a better story, one he couldn't narrate, one he would never be invited back into. Spring came louder than usual that year. The tulips had returned, thicker, brighter, more unapologetic. They lined the fence like quiet witnesses to my resurrection. Even the bees seemed to linger longer. One morning, a knock at my door startled me. A young woman stood there, holding a clipboard and a camera slung across her chest. Miss Grace Ellison? I nodded. I'm with the Low Country Life magazine. We'd love to feature your garden in our upcoming issue. It's been nominated for the local Renewal Spotlight Award. I blinked. Me? The woman who, a year ago, couldn't look in the mirror without shrinking? She smiled, stepping into the yard. It's more than just flowers, she said, eyes scanning the tulips, the jasmine, the wild lavender I planted by instinct. There's a story here. You can feel it. We walked together as she took photos. She asked questions about soil, bloom cycles, watering routines. And then, as we stood near the oldest oak tree, she turned to me. Can I ask you something personal? I nodded. You have a glow. What's your secret? I paused. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because it wasn't something you could bottle, market, or turn into a morning routine. I looked at the flowers, then at her, and said, letting go of people who mistake age for absence. She wrote it down slowly as if it was something sacred. The article came out 2 weeks later. A full-page spread with the headline, "The Garden That Grew a Woman Back to Life. Friends called, strangers sent letters." A local school invited me to speak to young girls about resilience. I went, and I told them the truth. You are not a second draft. You are not an afterthought. And you do not expire because someone failed to recognize your worth. They clapped. Some cried. And as I stood there in front of those bright young faces, I realized I hadn't just survived. I had bloomed, quietly, completely, without permission. And the best part? He had to watch it all from a distance. He said I was too old to be loved, as if love had an expiration date, as if beauty only existed in youth, as if my softness, my stories, my time-worn skin were something to hide, not honor. But what he didn't know was that the woman he tried to shrink had roots deeper than he could ever understand. I didn't scream when he left, didn't beg, didn't tear myself apart trying to fit into his narrow idea of desire. I just let go. I let go of the idea that I needed to be smaller to be chosen. Let go of the fear that aging made me irrelevant. Let go of him and everything he never saw in me. And then something wild and quiet happened. I came back to myself, not as I was in my 20s or 30s, but as I had never been before, whole, sure, unapologetic. The revenge, it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was the silence of not replying, the silence of growing without needing to explain it, the silence of being so profoundly at peace that his name felt distant. He wanted to be the author of my story, to write me as a footnote in his own redemption arc. But I took back the pen, and I wrote something he could never touch. A life, fully mine, in bloom. And the most beautiful part? He had to watch it happen, from the outside, alone.